All right, well, I'm here today with my guest, Dr. Hamid Mizani. Dr. Mizani, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Good morning, Tiffany. Thank you for asking me to come to the show. Well, I'm a kidney specialist here in San Antonio, Texas. My story of how I got here is a little interesting. I'm originally from Iran. I left the country when I was 12 years old. And my father and mother, essentially, my dad was a firefighter. Middle-class family, a lot of difficulties at the time, 1985. And his dream was essentially for me to become textual, words, a servant of humanity. I did not understand what that means at that time. My worries was, can I find a, Atari, which used to be like a Nintendo of now, game, how do I get a better bike, or how do I go out and play with my friends? But his idea was different, was how do I make this 12-year-old into a man who in future could perhaps serve the humanity.
But you know what? That knowing you, I would say that you're living up to that future, to what he wanted you to be. But go ahead, tell me a little bit more.
Unfortunately, he never got to see what happened to me. He passed away early on when I was 23 years old. I remember one day he came visit me in Rochester, New York, where I was doing my medical training. And we went to the ICU, and he started looking at all these patients on different life support machines, ventilators, and, intubated, unresponsive, in coma. And he was sitting in the ICU looking at them. It was like about 10 o'clock at night, rainy day, very cold, winter time. And I looked at him, and he had the newspaper upside down. So I say, Dad, why are your newspapers upside down? Then I realized clearly that he was not reading the newspaper. He was just glancing, pulling it down, looking at me, working with the patient, pulling it up, pulling it down, and he was living a dream coming true, which was beautiful because, I realized he's not even looking at the pictures, because you would clearly notice. But then he told me a sentence which changed his life and my life, and was the following. If I ever end up on life support and you think that I'm not coming back, let me go. Wow. A week later, he had a massive stroke, and he died. I did keep him alive for a week, just so that my mother and siblings could sort of, and including myself, cope with a sudden loss of who he was as a father, hold his hand, and remember those moments. But he saw that, nothing more. Now, going back to the story of 12-year-old kid, at that time, there was a war between Iran and Iraq, which, it's lasted about 8 years, and many, many people died. He thought best place for me was to, come abroad. And my brother was living in Puerto Rico, which is obviously part of the United States. He talked to him. They flew to Turkey. We went to Turkey and tried to get a U.S. visa to go to Puerto Rico to study. Of course, political stuff happening on the outside world, which I was not privy to. I was 12 years old. I was looking for my bicycle and, football and soccer and
games and fun stuff.
And computers were kind of new in homes, somebody had an Atari game. You really want to be a friend with that
You're
person.
dating yourself, buddy.
So we went to Ankara, Turkey, and went to the U.S. Embassy, and, he brought letters from then the governor of Puerto Rico, who knew him, to say these are good people and so on. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, I didn't get a visa. So my life changed. I was like, okay, let's go back home. So I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
And my father is, no, you're not going back to Iran. You're going to find a future. And as dark as the future could be, because it's unknown to the person, to me as a child, it became the most beautiful thing that I've lived through. I've made friends that I could have never made any other way because I was alone. And let me tell you something about friends. Friends can be closer to you than your own family.
Yeah.
At times. They'll do things for you that will puzzle you. Why? And hopefully you do the same for them years later. So from Turkey, Ankara, I was there for about 8 months or so. So many things happened. Mom and dad went back to Iran. My brother had to come back to Puerto Rico. I lived alone in a little apartment, 1 bedroom. I had to learn how to cook without a kitchen, without microwave. It was very interesting. God. I had to go through winter with not regular clothes. Winter clothes. It was summertime when we came over. Little things that you think are not important really become important. Mm-hmm. I would talk to the wall. I don't know if you've seen the movie Castaway. There's a ball called Wilson. And to me, that ball has an incredible meaning, Wilson, because I talk to the wall. So here, when you're 12 years old, you're living in a country that you don't know and the language you don't speak, and you have no friends, if you have no families, you are fearful for your life. Think about that. So you would not want to go outside frequently. You want to stay indoor. And it's like a prison, right? There's no iPhones. There's no Snapchat or, all these games. There's none of that. There's a TV that you don't understand what they're saying. But at the same time, you have to stay uplift, okay, this is the future that I'm walking into. How do I make the most of it? Because I know my father actually sold all that he's had just to buy me a ticket to send me abroad. And his dream is to become a servant of humanity. And how do we go about that?
And how do I do it as a 12-year-old?
And what's surprising is that if you would have asked me before, can a 12-year-old do this? I would have said, no, definitely not me. Right? But I think when you put people to the task, you'd be surprised what they can do.
And, that's part of what this show is about, is that people who are making history and who are historic in the sense of humanity and what happens with humanity don't know that they are at the time.
Right.
And that this story epitomizes that. You didn't know that you would be the man that you are right now. The same man that saved my brother's life. The same man that saved many lives. But when I say, I've said to many people that you saved my brother's life. My brother was, he was dying. And that he had an infection. Nobody could figure out what it was. So when your dad wanted you to be a servant of humanity, he truly spoke that into your life and into your heart and into who you are. And that is evident to anyone who actually takes the time to get to know you. So I'm glad that he said that, and that he put you on that trajectory.
Right.
In your heart and in your mind, because would you have had the wherewithal to just keep going and bringing in doctors until you figured out what was wrong with my brother? That took weeks. Right.
I think that is a very good example of not giving up.
That's right.
That's all it is. Okay, so oftentimes in life you come across things, moments, and you see that a lot even in our youth. Suicide in schools and universities is they're faced with a challenge, and that challenge is too powerful for them to think, I can get through this and look at the next day and the next morning. Oftentimes, if you train your mind and your brain and your body to say, I can make it. That's all it takes in life. You do not have to be intelligent, smart, outstanding in that regard. You just have to be a hard worker. And if you don't give up and you're a hard worker, that is essentially the recipe to your success. And success could be defined in so many different ways. But my success, for example, with your brother, it was not of me doing. It was to gather the team that could help me to make him better. Go home. When I see him now in the office, and he comes back, he flies from Dallas to come to San Antonio, see me, and flies back.
Yep.
It is beautiful. I mean, when I see this man walking in the door, I look at him as if you're looking at a piece of art.
Yeah.
In a sense that, oh my God, look at this human being who was in that condition, and look at him now. It looks great. It is priceless. So for all those people out there that want to be in healthcare, it is not about reputation. It's not about having a white coat and people, just praising you. It's about the product, what you do, which is changing lives and serving humanity. All the nurses that go in those rooms and take care of patients with COVID nowadays, that we're with that in the pandemic, they are risking their lives much more than anyone else, in a sense of much more than the doctors and so many other people. They need to be praised, but they do it for the love that they have, and they do it because they enjoy seeing the patient get well and go home and see their kids and family.
And that's what we're saying. When there are people who are making history and they don't realize that they are, because it is just who they are.
Right.
And that's why you're here, because that's who you are.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.